Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movies You Should Have Watched. Today we'll be covering Sneakers from 1992. And with me, as always, is my comrade in cinema arms, Ranting Monkey.
Hello, hello, hello.
So, hello, chat. I see Sylvanas there and Adam Mangold. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys.
Good morning to all that are here in the morning, and to those of you listening later on. Sneakers is, I saw this in the theaters when it first came out. I loved, and still to a certain extent do love, spy movies and intrigue movies and those kind of things. I was a big James Bond fan as a kid. And this movie came out, and it's a combination of so many different things. I mean, it's a caper movie, it's a comedy, it's kind of a meditation on the information age. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in this movie.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I rewatched this, I was surprised by how relevant it is today.
Mm-hmm.
For a movie in 1992, one, the NSA becomes a major player in this movie. And when I watched this movie, and I probably saw it in 93, because I saw it first on video. The NSA, nobody talked about the NSA.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to what all they find out, but not just like central themes of this movie, but actual players in this movie. This is almost a predictive movie.
Yeah, and that's the thing that has always stuck with me about it, is that there are things said and concepts explored in this movie which will, given the current state of our technology, will never stop being relevant. Yeah. And it was talking about these things really before the internet even happened on a wide scale. Like, the internet really didn't come to the fore until maybe like the mid 90s, like 3 or 4 years after this movie was made. So sure. It was written long before we ever encountered most of the issues that we're dealing with today when it comes to the spread of information, the availability, the accessibility, and the privacy of information.
So the movie opening, that is not predictive. That was actually a theme for many movies in this era.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off with Cosmo and Martin hacking.
Well, real quick, for anybody listening to this, if you have not seen Sneakers, go watch Sneakers before you listen to this, because even though this isn't particularly a mystery movie, there are twists in it, per se, mm-hmm. that are going to completely ruin.
Yes.
Now, before we get into the actual plot, I want to mention a couple things. First off, the opening titles deal with anagrams. The mm-hmm. stars' names are mixed up into different words and then reassembled into the real thing. And that has no meaning to you at all when you watch the movie, and only really comes into play way middle of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, too, that I want to point out, and this is a running thing for the entire film, the musical score. Okay, James Horner did this, and it is perfect. It sets the tone so well. It's got this sort of sad, almost regretful woodwinds thing going on throughout it. It's kind of jazzy, but it's also sort of, it plays with both being sort of dark and depressing on one hand, but also kind of light and humorous on the other. It's kind of sardonic. It's kind of sarcastic in a way.
You often pick up on the score much more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the score is either it works and I don't pay any attention to it,
mm-hmm.
or it doesn't work and it's like, oh, fuck, you're ruining a movie with the music.
Yeah.
So this is one of the former for me. It worked with the movie well enough that it didn't break it for me.
I think the music really helps in a subtle way to enhance kind of this mood of, and we'll get into this, but I mean, like you said, the opening scene starts in 1969, and it's kind of in this sort of dull, faded out colors and everything. And we meet Cosmo and Martin, and they are like high school guys, and it's a snowy night, and they're hunkered down in some room in some college, and they are doing effectively hacking. And what are they hacking? Well, they're hacking the financial accounts of what, like the Republican National Committee or something?
Yeah, let's pause here for just a moment. Guys, if you are a hardcore Donald Trump supporter, you may not like this movie because of some of the themes in it. This is definitely there's liberal overtones to this movie that just ignore them, guys. It's not horrible that they're hacking the Republican National Committee, and the first thing they do is give their money to the Black Panthers.
Yeah, $25,000 to the Black Panthers.
So there are parts of this movie that you're going to go, if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, but it is still a good movie. Please still watch it. It's excellent.
So they're sitting up there and they're hacking. They're having this conversation. First off, I want to say the actors who played the younger versions of Robert Redford and Ben Kingsley did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Like the guy playing the young Robert Redford, really good job, especially with the makeup and just the mannerisms and everything. So they're arguing back and forth a little bit and sort of musing somewhat on this revolutionary sort of world-changing thing that they're doing. They really have these high hopes for themselves that they're going to sort of redistribute the wealth to the places that need it and make the world a better place. So they banter about it a little bit, and then they have a bet of who's going to go out for pizza.
Yes.
And Cosmo, he does this trick with a coin. He takes a quarter and puts it. It's in one of his hands, and he says, "Pick the hand." You pick the hand with the coin. You don't have to go. And Martin picks a hand, and the hand's empty. And then Martin goes off for pizza, and then Cosmo reveals that both hands are empty. And magic and misdirection are also going to be a part of this this movie as we proceed too. So that a lot of little themes are set up in the first scene that resonate throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and on top of it, you have the subtext, and then you have the main text. And the main text in this one is that Martin goes out for pizza. He gets into their what is it, a VW bus?
Yeah, a little bus.
It won't start. But it turns out to be a great thing that he's the one that had to go, because police show up and arrest Cosmo.
Yeah, they caught him, or somehow they detected that there was a breach, and they arrested Cosmo. And Martin runs up underneath the window of the building where Cosmo is, almost to warn him maybe, but it's kind of too late. And he sees Cosmo being taken away, and he runs off in the night with Cosmo yelling after him. And then the snow, in a really great transition, moves to television static. And then we back out, and it's a monitor next to a sleeping, much older Martin. And he wakes up inside of the the sneaker van, let's say.
Yeah.
And so we've jumped forward something like 20 years, we're going to say for the sake of argument, 20 to 25 years. If we're talking from 69 to 92, so something like that. And in short order, we are introduced to several characters doing a thing. And it turns out that Martin has this team of people made up of Whistler, played by David Strathairn, who is blind, but a very good, like, audio technical wizard or something. Mother, played by Dan Aykroyd, who is a conspiracy theorist and sort of... he's quoted later on as saying he has the best hands in the business. So he's like a thief, like a safecracker kind of guy, but also a sort of electrician.
He does their electrical work.
Sorry, what?
I said he does their electrical work, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does electrical work, some grunt work too. Then you've got Marty, who's played by River Phoenix in one of his last roles before he died. He is quoted later as having been a computer hacker himself, but also kind of an electrical technician type guy. Crease, Donald Crease, played by Sidney Poitier, who is a character you never really see much, or at least I mean, you know, when he shows up, there's a certain level of gravitas and class he brings to everything, and he does a good job here. And he plays Donald Crease, who's a former CIA agent, which gives you a government connection. Oh, so wait, no, Marty was not River Phoenix. Carl was River Phoenix.
Yes, Car. Okay.
Marty is Robert Redford. I think I got my names mixed up. Marty is Robert Redford. Martin Bishop is how he's known here. So Martin Bishop. And so these guys are on a caper, we find out. We don't know why or what they're doing exactly at first, but we find out. They're breaking into a bank. Yes. So Mother taps into the phone lines for the alarm system, and then Whistler is playing the agent at the security company, and then they crack the lock and they disable the fire alarm and they hack into the computer. The whole thing is just like this nice, tightly wound little caper scenario. And then while they're talking, we get to learn a little bit about our characters. And Mother, down in like the sewer or something, tapping into the lines, he's on the radio and he starts asking Kreese about an earthquake that occurred in, I don't know, Mexico or something, or Guadalajara or whatever. And he's asking Kreese this because he was in the CIA. He's like, "You were in the CIA, right? You know about the earthquake that happened while Reagan was visiting, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "Are you telling me the CIA caused an earthquake?" "Well, I'm just saying."
Yes.
And then Whistler is reading a Braille book, but we see the camera pulls back and we see it's a Playboy. There's all these little jokes and things going on, and it's great. And it does for me at least, I always thought that this was one of the few movies that did an ensemble cast and establishing an ensemble of characters well. Like, they all have their individual personalities. They're all very unique, and you get a gist of them very quickly.
Well, yeah, it's not forced. For instance, Sidney Poitier's background comes up because Dan Aykroyd is a conspiracy theorist, and you get to see both of what they do without it being some kind of exposition. It's just a natural conversation between two of the people involved in the caper.
Yeah, and it also seems like they're all very familiar with each other. It doesn't seem like they were just like dropped into this situation blank. It's that they already have something of an established camaraderie. They've been doing this a little while with each other.
And I'm gonna pause here for the caper part of this. Mm-hmm. This is really a predecessor to things like the modern Ocean's 11.
Yes,
which I just watched again the other day, which is why it jumped out at me. You have the two brothers in Ocean's 11, who just have this natural banter back and forth. And to me, that really came off in, I'm sorry, I'm horrible with all the names because there are way too many names for me to remember.
Yes,
I remember Cosmo, and I remember Whistler and Mother. But otherwise, it's like, but Mother is Dan Aykroyd. And the relationship between him and Sidney Poitier throughout this reminded me very much of the two brothers in Ocean's 11. There's a camaraderie, but there's also a clash.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But it comes off so natural in this movie, like I said, without exposition. It's just them talking. And in that talking, we learn one's a conspiracy theorist, one is this former CIA agent, and they've at least known each other for a while. And we didn't have to be told any of that.
Right. There are some exposition points later on that sort of clarify some things. But yeah, it's a soft sell with the characters. You're not hit over the head with them or anything. It comes out through the dialogue. It's really well done. Like I say, for so many characters you have to deal with. So they break into the bank. They set off a fire alarm with a smoke bomb they've already planted in a safe deposit box prior to this. They dissuade the security guard from calling the cops and everything. And Martin even says, he jumps over like a fence, says, "I'm getting too old for this." It's just like, get that old thing.
Yeah, because he trips, doesn't he there?
Yeah, he trips as he falls over a thing. So, already you're seeing that these characters are not like super duper perfect professionals. They're good at what they do, but they're also human, which is really important to this, because human failing, again, there's so much going on in this movie. So they finish this bank job. They transfer a whole bunch of money to an account, and then you cut to Robert Redford the next day, walking into the bank, withdrawing, I think, like $500,000 or something, some ridiculous amount of money. And he takes the suitcase full of money and he starts walking towards the exit, but then smiles at the security guard, then turns the corner, walks up the stairs to where all the bank manager people are. And he lays the suitcase in front of them, opens it up, shows them all the cash he just was about to walk out with, and says, yeah, so your security's laxing in different places, and I've got a full report for you. Now, who's got my check? And then we jump to him getting his check issued to him from the lady at the bank. And she says, so you break into places because people pay you to break into places to make them not able to break into places? He's like, yeah, it's a living. And she looks at the check and says, not a very good one. It's just like, holy shit. Excuse me.
Yeah, this sets us up that we suddenly realize what looked like they were just stealing money was actually, this is one of the first misdirections we get in the movie. They weren't actually stealing this money. That's their job, is to break in. And again, this is another foreshadow of things to come in the real world. People who are paid to test security.
Right.
I mean, cybersecurity specifically.
Yeah, these guys would be considered, I guess, like white hat hackers.
Yeah.
Is that they're basically doing it to test the system and see where the failings are, the weaknesses, so that the businesses can then plug those holes. And again, this is just at the beginning of where we were going with the internet. So this entire concept, especially involved with the information stuff, which we'll get to later, really is just so prescient to what is going to happen just a couple of years after the movie was made. Mm-hmm. So we jump to basically the group's clubhouse. They've got this sort of like loft workspace area that's got couches and workbenches and all this other stuff. It's kind of a boys club. And Martin's sitting there, and I think River Phoenix comes up and says, "Hey, there's two suits here that want to talk to you." And Redford says, "Shoes? Expensive." Which is always like, it's like, so he straightens his tie and he walks in there. And you've got two well-suited men, one of whom is Timothy Busfield, which, if you've ever seen 30-something or The West Wing, you'll recognize real quick. He's got his red hair. And at that time, he was known for being sort of this soccer dad in 30-something, which was a TV show about, like, grown-ups in their late 30s or something kind of deal.
A bunch of whiny bitches. That's what it was.
A bunch of whiny bitches is what it was.
In their 30s.
And so they start questioning him about his team. And he starts going through the roster and he starts describing each person. Like, Mother has the best hands in the business. And they say, like, Carl was expelled from school for changing his grades with the computer. And Donald Crease was a former CIA agent, and so on and so on. So we get a little exposition to better flesh out who we're all dealing with.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is another part. I mean, it is exposition, but it comes off so naturally through what they're talking about.
Right. It makes sense
it's
to
not
the narrative.
Forced.
Yeah, it's not ham-fisted. It makes sense for what they're doing. But as they start rattling off information that they already know about Martin's team, he gets the whiff of, okay, guys, I don't work for the government. And he says, oh, we're from the NSA. And he says, okay, well, why don't the NSA, whatever you want to do, why don't the NSA do it? And this is the quote that I love, because it's so sadly ironic to what has happened in the interim from when this movie was made to now. He says, "We're not chartered for domestic surveillance."
I know, right?
I was like, oh, to be back in those days.
wait till we get to the end, because I have a lot to say on this topic.
Yeah. Yes. So these two guys tell Marty, it's like, look, we have a job that needs to be done. We can't have our fingerprints on it, and so we want you to do this. And Martin's like, sorry guys, I'm not interested. And he says, well, here's our card. Give us a call if you change your mind, Mr. Bryce, which is Martin's real name. So they know who Martin really is, which holds the specter of these old criminal situations that he was involved in way back when. Now, my first thought after that, and I've thought about this for years, like every little flaw I think about this movie, and we'll get to them, I've had in my mind ever since I saw the movie, because there are some loose ends in a lot of this movie. But the one that first occurs to me is statute of limitations. I mean, even if they did know who he was, now I don't know if it's because it's a federal crime, if it would not go away. Maybe that's the case.
That would be what it would be, because we see this with a lot of federal crimes, where they're still looking for the people.
Yeah, that's true. So that always seemed a little bit odd to me, but I wasn't sure if statute of limitations applied to federal, like wire fraud kind of thing or not. So that might be true. But yeah, we're not chartered for domestic surveillance, says the NSA guy. It was great. So Martin, now officially scared, he goes to meet with these guys at the address provided on the business card. And it's this big federal building in downtown. I think we're in like San Francisco. Is this is where we're set? San
Francisco.
And so he goes into this office where the two guys are. And he says, they start chit-chatting, and Martin says, you know, I would have joined the NSA, but they found out my parents were married. Yeah. It's just, and the one guy, the guy with the dark bags under his eyes and really mean-looking guy, not Timothy Busfield, starts making a move against him. He's like, okay, calm down. And so we get the briefing on what the job is. So to summarize, because there's a lot going on here, they tell Martin about a mathematician named Yannick. I forget what his first name is. Yannick. His last name's Yannick. And that Yannick is working on a black box under the project name C-Tech Astronomy. And they kind of leave hanging in the air what this is all about and where he's getting his funding from. And Martin just goes, oh, don't tell me it's Russia. And I was just like, man, you know how many times I've said that over the last 6 months? Don't tell me it's Russia. But yeah, so the implication is that this mathematician is being funded by the Russians to create this black box to do something involving, information, but they don't know what. And so they want Martin to retrieve the black box so that the NSA can study it and figure out what's going on, and also prevent whatever the Russians are doing from going forward. That's the gist. Now, the offer they give him is $175,000 payoff, and they will clean his record. They will.
The 175,000 payoff. This has to be mentioned. In '92, that was worth a lot more money.
Yes, that was a lot of money back then.
I keep coming across this as I watch Married with Children. Sorry, they talk about what large sums of money are, and to them it's like $5,000. And while that is a lot of money, it's not what it was back then.
Right. Yeah. So, So there's a lot of things about this movie that seem quaint and antiquated, even though they're talking about things that are still relevant today and the issues and stuff. But yeah, $175,000. It's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. If somebody wanted to give me $175,000, I wouldn't turn it away. Yeah. But when you try thinking about splitting it up amongst the entire team of people, it becomes a lot less money, at least by today's standards.
Yeah, real quick, I'm going to do the inflation calculator, see what that does come to today.
All right, what is 175?
1992, right?
92, yes.
And 2018, 175. Today would be 310.
Okay, so not earth-shattering still, but quite a bit of more money.
A lot easier to split between 6 people?
Yeah, something like that.
It's like $50K each.
So we jump back to the clubhouse, and Martin. So we're in sort of like the aftermath of him explaining the entire situation to his team, as well as the fact that he isn't who he's said he was.
Yeah, because they don't know his past.
Right, they have no idea. I mean, they all know it bits and pieces about each other. But it's true that they don't all have a really good idea of all who they're working with. This is just all the circumstances that brought us together, sort of thing. And they start talking about a couple of guys are mad, mother's mad, and that kind of thing. And then Whistler says, well, Bish, I'm in it for the money. I don't care if you go to jail. Yeah. Because they're all deciding whether or not they're going to be in on this caper, and which is a great line. So they try to figure out, okay, how are we going to approach this situation? Because we have to get intel on Yannick. But he's holding a seminar soon in a day or two that they can go and attend and try to get some information on the guy. But they need some kind of cover to make it easier. So they need to get a girl to go with them, sort of like as a date, sort of as to pass it off as they're just normal people going to this thing. And then they start talking about girls they've used in the past for previous jobs and things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny. And then Martin says, I was thinking of calling Liz. And then everybody stops and turns and looks at him. And so, again, all of this is very implied. We're not hit over the head with a lot of exposition, but we slowly learn that Liz is his ex-girlfriend, Martin's, who apparently they had a very acrimonious falling out, and it seems like a bad idea for him to go back to Liz for anything.
And once again, I'm reminded of Ocean's 11. I mean, it's a little bit different, but Danny Ocean, he's in it for his wife.
Yes.
The more I watch this, the more, and I get it that they're completely different capers, but it is amazing to me how many references kept hitting me over the head from Ocean's 11, having just watched it last week. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Of course, Ocean's 11 is a remake of the old Frank Sinatra film, so that Sneakers might have been influenced by the old Ocean 11 is not outside the realm of possibility either. So we cut to basically like a prep school kind of environment or something, and Liz, who's played by Mary McDonnell, who I gotta say, there are several redheads in media from my youth that I blame for my my fixation on redheaded women. I think Mary McDonnell in this one might be one of them, because I always found her exceedingly attractive. But maybe that was just me.
She is. But this is the one place I don't like this movie.
Okay.
Is to me that there's almost a forced romantic thing going on here.
Okay.
I would have liked it better if they just kept it, and not necessarily even the guys. They could have had a woman in the group as well. But I think this would have played better without any romantic subplots.
Well, it's not. It seemed to me that at that point the romance between them was more platonic, supportive than it was like romantic. If that makes any sense. I mean, they don't really force like some sort of love thing between them. I mean, obviously they care for each other, but I never got a sense they were pushing like a really hot and heavy romance. There really isn't much time for that either.
Well, and that's where I get to especially where I didn't need any of that subtext. They could have brought in, River Phoenix mentions some girl that had worked with them before.
Yeah.
I think Dan Aykroyd does too. They could have brought in any one of those without it being, somebody that there was a romantic past with. That I just hated that part of it because it doesn't fit. I think the reason it fits is because she knows the stakes, because she knows Martin's past. He had told her about his past, so she already knew of the true danger he was in. If she doesn't help, I think that's why having a previously established person makes sense if you're bringing them from the outside. Also, you get somebody who is not part of the club to sort of act a little bit as the audience and ask questions that otherwise the guys would not say because they're just part of the situation. And I switched, but for me again, like Whistler, what does he say? I'm in it for the money. So I mean,
yeah,
you could, hey, we got this shit ton of money. What do you think? And
that's true.
So yeah, like that part just always set a little weird with me.
Let's see. And everybody, and we've learned that everybody's kind of familiar with Liz because apparently Liz was part of, or at least familiar with the whole group prior to their breakup. So there's already a little bit of a relationship established between her and the rest of the guys.
Sure.
So anyway, so he tells Liz that he needs her help to go with him and help him understand some things in relation to this caper, because if he doesn't, the NSA is going to reveal his past and he'll get in super duper trouble. But if he gets through this, then his past is cleared up, etc. So she agrees to go on that basis. and they go to this lecture slash seminar of this mathematician slash cryptologist, Yannick, who is played in his very first role by Donald Logue. And if you don't know who Donald Logue is, you've seen him everywhere in the years since. He was in Blade. He's currently in Gotham playing Harvey Bullock. So the very first role he ever had in a film, and he looks like a baby then, and he hasn't changed all that much. But every time that I ever saw him after that, before I even knew his name, I was like, oh, it's Yannick. Oh, it's the guy from Sneakers. Because for whatever reason, he just made that much of an impression on me. So they go to this lecture, and afterwards they have sort of this after party kind of thing, and they're kind of mingling and all this kind of stuff. And Martin's trying to pick up on whatever details he can about Yannick that might be useful as they do this caper to find this black box. And in the course of being at this little get-together, Gregor, an old friend of Martin somehow in the business of things, a Russian diplomat or official, recognizes him, and they have a little chat. And we learn that not only does Gregor know Martin, but as Martin Bishop, so far as we know, but he's also now some kind of liaison with the Russian government, which has been some sort of change as a result of glasnost, basically, or like, yeah, the sort of softening of tensions between the U.S. and Russia, which, you know, in the early 90s was still kind of a thing, even though the wall had just fallen, but there was this sort of unknown landscape before the international community of like, okay, Russia's in flux. There's a lot of unknowns going on between Russia and the rest of the world because their entire government basically fell apart. So that adds to sort of like the instability factor of this entire situation, which is why the whole thing about the Russians getting hold of some, you know, secret project is still a thing. So after we have a little chat with Gregor and establish him, then we cut to the stakeout of Yannick's lab. He's got this workshop or this work office in an office building. And the guys are in a van, like in a parking garage across the street. And they've got cameras all set on his windows. They're trying to watch what he's doing and also record any passwords he's putting into his computer or anything else.
Before you go any further, I want to say the reveal that comes up here is my favorite in the movie because I never saw it coming.
Okay. So Yannick comes into the office and he starts tapping his keyboard, and they got the cameras set on the keyboard so they can record him typing his password in. And then this woman who had been Yannick's assistant, we kind of saw at the reception, walks in and starts talking to him. And then they start making out, or she starts like wanting him to like fuck her right there.
Yeah.
And so as soon as the guys in the van start hearing that the conversation's gone from something professional to there's this really funny moment where they're all kind of fighting to watch through the camera to see what's going on.
River Phoenix is like, let me see. And I can't remember which one. I think it's Sidney Poitier tells him, grow up.
Yeah, grow up.
Then you see him nudge Martin because he wants to look in the camera.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, let me see. It's great.
Let me see.
It's a great little thing. So they start making out, and as a result, they kind of they miss out on being able to see the password being put into the guy's computer, so they can try to figure out like the plans for the black box or where the black box is or anything else. So instead of being able to figure that out, he's got to go into the so they go back to the clubhouse, and they kind of review the footage, and they see they can't get the password. They have no idea what to do now because their only chance at maybe being able to get to the information has been blown. So they go over the footage again that they filmed of the office, and they had described the layout of the office to Whistler, because Whistler's blind, in the van earlier. And so when they go over it again, Whistler says, guys, the black box is sitting between his pencil case and his phone on the desk. And like, what are you talking about? They're like, Whistler, you know, I hate to tell you this, but you're blind. He's like, no, guys, don't look, listen. And the lady who had come in, the girlfriend, says, I left message on your service, but you do not call. And when they were going over the features of the office, they mentioned an answering machine. And so they're like, why does the guy have an answering machine if he's got an answering service?
Mm-hmm.
And like, and it's like, okay, there it is. It's sitting right on the desk.
And that's the one that, of all of the stuff that happened in this movie, I was like, oh wow, that was really smart, because it happens so fast. And this is the misdirect part of this. I mean, they've got you watching this beautiful woman who's obviously coming on to him. And if you think about it, yeah, they're right. Why do you have an answering machine and an answering service? And when Whistler makes that one, that's the time in this movie, I was like, oh damn, good one. Yeah, that was my favorite reveal in this whole movie.
So then they move to Martin going basically into the field and breaking into the guy's office. And there's this nice little exchange, which also sets up some stuff for later, where River Phoenix goes in there ahead of Martin at the front desk and starts making a claim that he's got like he's got this order that has to be filled, and he's sort of like distracting the guy at the front desk. And Martin walks in with like a cake and some balloons or something, or some roses, and he says, hey, I need to get up to the 3rd floor for a birthday thing. And so they start splitting the attention of the guy at the front desk, and they basically con him and play him to where Martin just kind of goes like, hey, can I get the elevator to go up, please? I'm in a hurry. And the guy just sort of like in a fluster does it and unlocks the elevator and lets him go up.
Yeah, well, he's still fighting with yeah, because it's great because they set this up where River can't get in, and again, misdirect. And then Martin just sneaks right in front of him. I love caper movies. I really do. I like that kind of shit.
Yeah, I'm a big caper movie fan. Another big laugh comes up when prior to this, we'd seen when they were discussing their plan, we'd seen Martin practicing his lock picking skills on a dummy lock to get ready to pick the lock on the guy's office door. And then he gets up the stairs, he gets to the door, and there's a keypad lock.
Yes.
And he's like, so he's got a little radio bud in his ear, and he says, guys, what do we do about a keypad lock? And they're like, oh shit. And they're all like scrambling in the van. And then Mother gets out a book, and he's like, oh no, sorry. Kreese has got a book out with Mother, and they're looking through it, and they're like, okay, Martin, this is a long shot, but try this. And then we cut back to Robert Redford just kind of nodding to whatever's being said in his ear. He's like, uh-huh. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And right. Okay. I'll give it a shot. And then after this long setup, he just kicks the door open.
Yes.
It's like, it was so great. The setup was just, I mean, there's really good comedic timing in this. And that part in particular always makes me really happy. So he goes straight to the answering machine, which is just a box, basically. It's a dummy answering machine with no cords on it or anything. And he opens it up, and inside there's this tangle of wires and this big computer chip inside this little housing kind of thing that looks all sort of secret and technical and all that. So he picks up the whole answering machine fake out, puts it in his suitcase, and is about to leave when the assistant walks in. Now, she starts to scream. He grabs her mouth and covers up. He says, "Don't scream. I'm not going to hurt you." And then he's not sure what to do because this isn't part of the plan. So the guys in the van start feeding him ideas through his earpiece. And it's like, she's like, "Who are you?" "I'm a private investigator." "Private investigator, who hired you?" "Mrs. Yannick." "There is no Mrs. Yannick." "Yeah, well, that's the thing." So he goes through this whole spiel where he convinces her that her boyfriend, the professor guy, is married, and his wife over in Sweden or Norway or whatever hired him to find out what was going on with her. And then there's this weird back and forth where he's trying to convince her not to say anything, because if she does, then she'll be playing into the hands of the wife and hurting your relationship with the guy you love.
Yeah.
Even though he's the guy hired by the wife to do this shit.
Yeah, and it's the sad part is that would actually probably work in real life with a lot of women. Anyhow, I'm not here to judge women.
Yeah, but the best part of this is that he's trying to talk her into like not saying anything. He's like, if you really love him, so go to him, hold him, and never let him know that you know what you know, you
Yeah.
know. And then Whistler on the phone on the headphone says, and give him head whenever he wants. And then he starts saying, and give him ha. He almost says it, and they're cracking up, and he's like, and give him help, to the thing. It's and he's like, it's great.
It's one of the scenes where you get the human side of these guys interacting with each other, because that's some shit guys would do to each other.
Yeah. And then it's party time. Like, they got the box, they won, the whole thing's over with. They're going to get $175,000, and Martin is going to have his record cleaned up, and they have a little party at the loft with Kreese and his wife, and they start talking about what they're going to do with their money. And Mother says he's going to buy a Winnebago and just like drive across the country. Kreese and his wife say they're going to go on a big worldwide trip, and Tahiti is especially the thing they go to. Whistler is just like going to give his money away, I think he said. And so they all start talking about that stuff, and everybody's having a good time. And they dance, and there's a dance scene, all that fun stuff. And so then we kind of shift to later on in the evening. All the adults are playing Scrabble over on a table. And Whistler starts getting curious about the mystery box. And so he and Carl start playing around with it. And Kreese is like, guys, do not mess with that thing. You don't know what it does. And it's like, no, I'm just taking a look. It's okay. It's okay. And so they start messing around with it, trying to figure out its function. And quite quickly, Whistler figures out that this is some kind of de-encryptor. This is some kind of like code breaker. Mm-hmm. And he starts testing it out. He says, Carl, you got the number for, the Federal Reserve? And, Carl, gives him the number to like use a modem to dial in kind of thing. And they bring it up on the screen. It's a whole bunch of jumbled nonsense. He hooks up the black box to the computer, and all of a sudden it's all decoded and they all have access. And they start going to the power grid and the airlines and all this other stuff, all these things that they shouldn't be able to get into. And all of a sudden this black box just makes it all accessible. And they start freaking out. Now, while they're doing this, and they're trying to, Martin has a thought, because he's trying to figure out what C-Tech astronomy means, because that was the code name of the project the guy was working on. And so while they're sitting at the Scrabble table, he just throws out all the letters on C-Tech astronomy, and they start rearranging them. And over the course of them rearranging them is the same time that the guys are sort of discovering what this box can really do. And just as they start figuring out the box can break into just about any system, they seemingly understand that C-Tech astronomy is an anagram for too many secrets.
Yes, too many secrets.
Too many secrets. So they suddenly realize that they are in danger, because Donald Kreese, the CIA guy, he looks at everybody and says, there isn't a government on this planet that wouldn't kill us all for that thing. Yeah. And he's absolutely right.
Which is weird, because in a few minutes he says something completely different. And we'll get to that in the next scene.
So they go on lockdown, and they even they let Kreese's wife and daughter go, but they say Liz has to stay because she was the only other person that knew Martin's secret. Because right now they don't know what's going on, and the only way this makes any sense is the NSA had to know Martin's secret somehow, and Liz was the only other one who knew. So everybody who was in on Martin's past has to stay until they figure this out. So they stay the night, and nothing happens, because Martin has to do the handoff the next morning, and they don't know what the situation is. So Martin and Kreese drive off to the meeting place to meet the NSA guys. Martin goes to them, and they're sitting at like a little outdoor cafe kind of thing. And he has the box with them, and he hands it to them. And just as the deal is about to wrap up, Kreese is at the car just a few feet away, And he's sitting there, and he's standing next to the car, and he looks down at the newspaper. And this is the one of those sort of too convenient things in the movie, just a little bit, but it's forgivable, but just a little bit. He looks down at the newspaper, and there's a headline that posted that says, famous mathematician murdered. And it was Yannick. And so Kreese is, oh shit, Yannick's dead, and we're just about to hand his black box off to some guys. And so he's like, he pulls out a car phone, which is like the oldest car phone you can imagine.
Yes.
And he says, Martin, because it's got a cord on. He's like, Martin, you have a phone call. And he's like, just a minute. And he says, it's your mother. As though talking about, mother or something, or just the fact that,
the way he says it lets Martin know
this is something serious. So Martin goes back to the car with the NSA guys kind of in mid whatever they were taking out of their suitcases. And Kreese says, get in the car and drive away. Yannick's dead, go. And then they're like, oh shit. So they jump in the car. Now the bad guys have the black box. This is important. The bad guys have the black box.
Because he did give it to him.
He did give it to him. And so then they speed out of there. And Kreese explains to him that Yannick's dead. What the fuck's going on? So they drive back to the federal building where this all started. And the federal building's being torn down because it had been condemned for a long time. Everything Martin saw was a fake out. The office, the whole setup was a con. So now it's like, oh shit, some unknown bad guys just got the box that decodes anything.
The box that any government will kill for.
And then to sort of underline the point, we cut to a scene where Kreese is like calling a bunch of guys that he knows from the CIA or whatever to find out who was really funding Yannick's.
Well, we missed one important part there. The one part I wanted to bring up when they're driving away. Sidney Poitier and Martin are having their discussion, and Martin says, "You said any government would kill for this," and Sidney Poitier goes, "Not ours, Martin." So one, this is a very patriotic movie still, because the U.S. government would never do that. But it does become important because that's why they don't know who these guys were, because they spoke perfect American. It's not like they had Russian accents or anything. Mm-hmm. So that does become a little bit important, because we know at that point it's not actually the NSA. That's how they sell it to us.
Right.
So yeah, it's not the American government who did this.
Yeah, and Kreese finds out real quick that Yannick's grant for the project came from the NSA. So the NSA didn't need to steal the thing they were already paying for. So the whole thing was a con. The question is, who was it? And so Martin's first conclusion is it must have been the Russians.
Yes.
And so, so Martin is going to confront the only Russian that he knows, which is Gregor. And it had been mentioned at the after party of the lecture that Gregor had like a concert he was attending soon, and that Martin should join him with Liz because Liz is so lovely, etc. So Martin goes off to this concert with a gun and basically kidnaps Gregor, taking him off to the side somewhere to ask him what the fuck's going on. Did you kill Yannick, etc. And Gregor's like, we did not kill him. And so, Martin, there's a lot of things going on here that you don't understand, and we need to work together, but I am not the bad guy. So Martin doesn't know who to trust. He doesn't know what's going on, but he goes with Gregor because he doesn't have another option at that point, and there might be people coming after him. So he gets into a car with Gregor, and Gregor starts flipping through this perp book of known rogue agents or officials and things from the U.S. and Russian side, and see if Martin recognizes anybody. And as he flips through, he comes to not Timothy Busfield, the redhead, but the other guy in the book. And it turns out that guy is ex-NSA. So he knew all the things to say, and he knew how to behave and all that stuff. But now he's basically this soldier for hire kind of guy. He's completely corrupt and not working with the government anymore. So it's still not clear who he's working for. But then they get pulled over in the middle of a tunnel. And Gregor makes a comment. He's like, oh, the FBI is always bothering me. Um, so as they come up to the car, Gregor turns to Martin and says, I can provide you asylum in this car as it is Russian property, basically. Do you want our protection? And there's this really tense moment where it's like, is Martin going to defect to the Russians in this situation? Yeah. It's really, really weird. And so FBI guy comes up to the door and the windows rolled down. He's like, Mr. Bishop, could you step outside, please? And Gregor turns to him again and says, do you wish our protection? And Martin's like, so he gets out of the car, you know, because this is getting too complicated. And the FBI guy, I put in quotation marks, takes the gun off of Martin that he had on him, and he puts on a glove and then uses the gun to kill Gregor and his driver right there in the tunnel.
Well, yeah, he asks him, is this gun loaded? And Martin goes, yes, it is. And pulls it out and kills the Russian with it.
Yeah, he kills the Russian and then leaves the gun on the sidewalk because the last person to hold the gun was Martin, so now there's fingerprints on it. And Martin's like just completely freaked out, and the FBI guy looks at him and says, too many secrets. And then they knock him out. And then we get the beginning of the other really interesting sort of sequence in this, where we kind of black out along with Martin. And then we start hearing all of these sounds as Martin is sort of like in a trunk, basically. And if you're not paying attention, they don't really seem like anything, or it's just sort of giving you the impression that he's on the move. But they become important later. And so he wakes up again inside this weird sort of high-tech, sort of minimalistic office with these big computer servers and all this other stuff going on. And out of the shadows walks Cosmo, who previously Martin had said to everybody what happened to Cosmo. He died in prison. That was the story. So Cosmo's suddenly alive, and he's all got his hair slicked back. It's Ben Kingsley looking completely sharp as a knife. And so they start, commiserating on what's going on. And Cosmo starts explaining to him that, he's on a crusade, basically. He says, remember what we used to do? Remember what we meant to do to change the world? We can do that now because I've got this black box. We can change the world. And Martin understands, okay, well, one, Gregor's dead. Yannick is dead. If Cosmo's involved in this, he's basically involved in murder. So there's some contradictions in Cosmo's crusade versus his actual actions. Mm-hmm. But Cosmo tries to get Marty on his side because Cosmo's like obsessed with Martin and their crusade when they were kids, basically. And Martin's listening to him talking about like what he's planning on doing and how he's done it. And he's like, you're crazy. You've really gone crazy. And so Cosmo, seeing that Martin's not coming on board, he goes over to his computer and he's got the box hooked up, and he basically just immediately hacks into the FBI's database. And he says, the police are looking for Martin Bishop in this murder. But of course, there is no Martin Bishop. But what if Martin Bishop's profile mentioned an alias? Or sorry, they're looking for Martin Bryce, but Martin Bryce has disappeared. What if there was an alias Martin Bishop? And so, which is information that the FBI didn't have previously. And so he enters that into the system and changes the guy's record so that basically if they connect the gun and the fingerprints to Martin Bryce, they'll also know to look for a Martin Bishop for murder.
Yep.
And I mean, then there's a lot of things going on in this conversation that they're having, because they start, like, I don't remember the exact words, but Cosmo does like a game they used to play when they were college students. He'd propose a notion, and then Martin would have to come back with he says, problem. People have information is not secure. What do? You encrypt the information. Right. But no encryption is perfect. So what do you do? And they go back and forth on this kind of thing, sort of, again, give sort of a meditation on data privacy and security at a time before really the internet existed, but it's still so relevant.
Well, at the time, I mean, if you go back to that time, nobody could, I don't think anybody could have predicted how important information would be these days. I mean, if you look at like what's gone on with Facebook, everybody freaking out because their surfing history has been known. And you tie that to everything that could be known about you on computer. This movie is way ahead of its time. It really is. What seemed fantastical in 92 is now like, oh yeah, I can see people killing over that.
Yeah. It's kind of creepy too. Even though all the aesthetics of the movie and the things involved are kind of antiquated compared to today's technology, the issues are exactly the same and probably even more relevant.
Yeah.
So Martin then gets knocked out again, and he's dropped off in the middle of the city somewhere. So he doesn't know where he's been. But now he knows that as soon as the government identifies the fingerprints on the gun, they're also going to know to look for Martin Bishop, and that his safety, freedom, everything else is under threat. So he and the entire team pack up their stuff and move off to the only other safe location they know at this point, which is Liz's apartment. So they take over Liz's apartment, and they set up all their gear, and they got wires everywhere, just freaking out. And what they're doing is that they know their only way out here is to basically contact the government and try to leverage some kind of deal, because they're really their only hope now of trying to figure this out, not only saving their lives, but also trying to get Martin from having to go to a prison or be convicted of murder and all this, because now it's really serious. So they lay out this whole like bounced phone call they're going to make to the NSA. And Whistler and Mother show that they're going to bounce it at like around like 7 different nations or something, this one phone call. And so they put the phone on one of those little phone cradle things. They used to be used for modems back in the day, like you'd see on War Games, that old movie. And they make, sorry.
I was just going to say, by today's standards, what they did is so cheap.
Yes.
Yeah. Back then it looked amazing. Like, wow.
Yeah, it looked amazing. It's like, oh, so you could bounce a call around all these nations. The computer screen shows all the countries on a little map with the little lines going from country to country. And so they make the phone call to the NSA. And he says, I want to talk to Director of Operations. What department? C-Tech Astronomy. And there's this long pause, and it's like, one moment. And then as soon as that happens, on the computer screen, they start seeing the trace start from the end of the bouncing, which is the place they called in Virginia or whatever, starting to go around the world and try to trace them back to San Francisco. So it's already happening. So then on the phone comes Darth Vader.
Yes.
So James Earl Jones, his voice comes over, which you can't get much more of an officious, serious voice than James Earl Jones talking to you. And so he says his name is Mr. Abbott. Now, the other thing is that they've hooked up this Penny Ante sort of lie detector, voice tension detector on the call, which has a little paper thing and the little needle going up and down, sort of like a lie detector, to sort of imply or at least suggest whether or not the person on the other end is being truthful. Now, this is based in fact a little bit. There is science behind voice, the use of voice to sort of detect tension or things like that. I don't think it quite works like they have in the movie, but for the sake of things, you go along with it, more or less.
Yeah, this is one of those places, suspend disbelief, guys.
So they he tries to say, like, look, I know where I know about the box. And they're like, do you have the item? He's like, no, but I can find it, basically. He says, where is the item? And like, can you guarantee my safety? And it's like, do you have it's like, yes, I can guarantee your safety. And then it's like, it's lying. And so they tell him, like,
that happens right as the trace is almost to them.
Right. They're like, Bish, hang up the call, hang up the call. They've almost got us. And you see the little pixel on the screen tracing the call back to San Francisco. Just about get there, and he hangs up the call. And so now the NSA knows, someone knows where to get the box, or that there's somebody that's also trying to attempt to get it, and there's this whole thing going on. We kind of leave that until the very end of the movie. So now they have to figure out, okay, we have to, the only leverage we have to save ourselves in this, in being tied to the murder of a Russian official, as a group or otherwise, is to get the box back. If we can get the box back, then we can, solve this entire problem. Now, I'm not quite sure how that alone solves the problem, but it doesn't hurt, I guess.
I think the thing there is all leverage, because even if he did kill the guy at that point, isn't the box worth one dead Russian?
Right. I guess that's the argument, amongst other things. So they start asking Bishop, like, where did you go? I mean, where was that? He said, I have no idea. I was in a room. It could be 10. They drove around in circles. It could be 10 miles away. It could be across the street. I don't know. And then Whisper starts saying, what did you hear while you were in the trunk? And they start breaking down like I heard a foghorn, right? And they're like, what bridges were fogged in last night? Well, there's only 4 bridges in the Bay Area, so these 2 were and these 2 weren't. Okay, so that nixes those 2 bridges. What else did you hear? And progressively, you go through all these little bits and pieces and details that he heard, that we as the audience heard too, but we didn't really notice. But he drags his memory for it. So he heard a foghorn. He heard the sounds of like seams in concrete, but the distance apart had to be figured out. And then he heard a cocktail party. I love that part. Yeah, I heard a cocktail party. Like, we need to hear a cocktail party. And Whistler's like, I think I know what he's talking about. And they go off to this giant, like, I don't know, like retention pond or something, where there's all these geese around, and they're all yattering and chattering and squeaking at each other. And in a collection of noises like that, it does kind of sound like a bunch of people talking. So they know they're close, and they figure out that there's this nondescript office building off in the distance in the middle of nowhere that isn't tied to anything. And of course, nothing that our government does in real life or anything, which I always found kind of interesting. So they stake out this building. They set up a camera. They film footage. Apparently, they're doing this over the course of several days, because we cut back to them reviewing footage from several days worth of activity. Which is interesting, given how everything seemed so tense and last minute when the whole call with the NSA was taking place, that they have all this extra time to just sort of like hang out and camp out and stake out this place. But anyway, you forgive that.
On that note, yeah, without the government actually knowing where, that's why breaking off the call when they did that gave them the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because the best they can trace the call is someone in San Francisco, and that's a lot of people. So
yeah,
I get what you're saying, because there's this sense of urgency, especially at that phone call, and then suddenly, we got time to just hang out and record people.
So they review footage that they've recorded from outside the building over several nights to figure out. Sorry,
real quick. I'm sorry. I need to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I will do some dancing tricks or something for the audience. I'll just look at the audience real quick. Hi, everybody in the chat. Let's see. We have point curation. Good luck. I'm behind 7 proxies. Are you guys hacking each other? Let's see. Okientative. Sorry. Oki native. Sorry, I'm just reading it all as one word. Cosmo was still idealistic and sort of pissed Martin ran and left him. Yes. There's a lot of this sort of like, you can only imagine that Cosmo sort of like got obsessed with Martin and their crusade and his friendship with him, because Martin was probably his last real friend prior to being sent to prison. So, memories like that don't fade that much, because it's the last good thing you remember. Let's see. Angela, hello. Data Wasteland. Hello. Yeah. Cocktail Party. Railroad Tracks. Yep. Le Nuggets. Sneaker O'Toole. Like Plenty O'Toole. Are we going back to James Bond or something? The Original Shroom. Hi. How are you? What else? Oh yeah, Noki Native says, "Remind me to make you an honorary blind person, Bish." Yeah, that's a great line too from Whistler.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
That's all right. I was just saying hi to the chat. So after reviewing the footage and the blueprints and everything else of the building they're able to get, they determine where Cosmo's office must be just because of the amount of like electricity and the frequencies coming off of the place for the sake of security. Mm-hmm. Then they determine whose office is right next to that through the video, and then they look up a guy named Werner Brandis. One of the unexpected and brilliant pieces of this movie's story. There's a guy next to the office named Werner Brandis who's got a 180 IQ because that's his license plate, which makes it really easy to track him down. So they have to figure out how to get into this place in the office. And by the recordings they have, apparently they were able to get sound inside the building through like a directional microphone, I guess. That was my guess from what they'd set up. And things people were saying inside the building led them to know that one of these security measures is a voice print lock that requires a key card, where the person walking into the security booth or something has to say, "My voice is my passport, verify me." So now they have a mission. They need to get Werner Brandis to say those words close enough for recording that they can use to get through the lock at the building without, breaking in or setting off all the alarms and everything. And they need to get his key card. So a lot of things they have to do.
This is the part that I never understood about the movie, is how they could know he needs to say that without already having it on voice.
Well, you see, that's the thing. If they have a directional microphone, they can hear it, but the quality's not good enough.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's a stretch. It is a stretch. No doubt about it.
Let's say that.
So they try to figure out about this guy, and they go steal his garbage. And they dump his garbage out on the floor in Liz's apartment. And they start going through it, trying to find out anything they could use as a way in to try to get close to this guy, to record him, whatever. And they find a receipt or some printout or something for a computer dating service. And they're trying to figure out, like, what are they going to do? They got to hook him up with somebody. And Liz is there, and she's looking through the garbage too. And all the boxes are broken down and like folded and everything. And she picks up this empty tube of toothpaste, and she says, "Guys, this guy isn't looking for some floozy or something. The man who rolled up this tube of toothpaste is meticulous, detail oriented. He's anal." And they all look at her, and she goes, What? And so they set up Liz on a blind date using the same service somehow. They hack it in, I assume, with Werner Brandis.
Who's played by the same guy who plays the insurance agent in Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
I don't know his name. He's a bit actor. God, he's a weaselly little dude, though.
Stephen Tobolowsky. Stephen Tobolowsky is he's actually he's a playwright, and he's an actor, and he's an author. He's like a Renaissance man and a musician, and but he does bit parts in all sorts of movies, usually playing something creepy, sometimes mostly nerdy, that kind of thing. But in this case, he's a total and absolute dork, and a little bit of a creep, honestly, as we get to later. But anyway, so we have a long sequence where Liz is at a Chinese restaurant with this guy, and she's got a tape recorder hidden in her purse or something. And so she's got this little checklist she has of all the words she has to record him saying, so that they can dupe together a tape of him saying all these things so they can use it to get through the lock. So over the course of a very long evening, she works very hard, and it's very funny to try to get him to say things like passport.
Passport one is just so weird.
Oh, it's so weird. Oh, God.
You know what word turns me on? Passport.
Yes.
Jesus.
Like she's at the end of her rope. She doesn't have any other way to get, like, that's the one word off the list that's not easily attainable in normal conversation.
Sure.
So they're spending the entire evening. They're up to the point where like the people running the restaurant want them to leave, and she's got this one word left that she has to get them to say, his passport. So finally she lets out with the sexual desire thing to get him to say it. He says it, and she's like, and you can see the relief on her face. She's like, "Oh, thank God, thank God we're alone." And she thinks she's gonna leave, and he's like, he's like, "Would you like to have breakfast with me?" And she's like, "Sure, whatever." And he's like, "Shall I call you or nudge you?"
Should I call you or nudge you? Such a great line.
Oh, it's great. And so she can't break away from this situation without raising suspicion, she thinks, I guess. So she goes back to his place with him. And so while they're there, the guys have to get not only his key card, but also the tape of his voice and everything. So they're able to get, they follow her to the house, and then she's able to steal his wallet. And then she hands his wallet and the tape outside the window. No, wait, sorry, they were recording the entire conversation from the van. That's right. She doesn't have to hand them the tape, but it's the key card that's the big part. Yeah, so they were recording his voice the entire time they were having the date back at the caper van, so they could piece together this recording they need. But yeah, it's the key card that's the big part. So she follows him back to his place, gets his wallet, hands it out the window to like mother or somebody who's there. They get the key card, hand her back the wallet. She puts it back in his pocket or whatever, his jacket. And then she continues on with this little thing where he's making her dessert or whatever. So there's a couple of things else that have to happen over the course of this caper. Something else that they know that's in the room is heat-sensitive motion sensors. And so they've got two options. Either they can wrap Robert Redford in like this neoprene rubber that will suffocate him and kill him, so he can move through the room without being detected because of his body temperature. Or they can raise the temperature in the room up to 98.6 degrees, and then he can only move 2 inches a second at most. Otherwise, the motion detectors will go off, and then all the men will show up with the shotguns and everything. So this is a very complicated caper that's going on. So all this is happening at the same time. So we talked about the date, but the date is happening at the same time that the guys are breaking into the office building to break into the environmental controls to raise the temperature in that room. And they do this again through some misdirection, where one of them is posing as a gardener. He goes into the bathroom, and that's Carl. He sneaks into the air ducts to do this work, while Mother replaces him in the same outfit outside as a gardener. When one of the guards gets suspicious about how long the guy was taking in the bathroom, he sees a guy out in the garden with a red hat doing the yard work again. So I guess they banked on the guy not getting suspicious. That's one of the little weak parts.
It's one of those things where, like, I mean, it uses human nature. I mean, there's always been times that people have snuck past us and we didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe he looked down for a minute when the guy came out of the bathroom and just, yeah.
Yeah. So Carl is up in the building's air ducts, essentially. All right. So all the pieces are in place, basically. They've got the card, they've got the recording, they've got the room heated up to allow Martin to move around. He's been given, over the course of practicing moving at 2 inches a second prior to this, a replacement fake answering machine that he has to practice carrying across a room at 2 inches a second. So, and that's important. That becomes important later. So, Martin goes to the building. He walks in like he owns the place, and just like nobody pays attention to his face, I guess, which is okay. He gets up to the right floor using Brandis's key card. He goes up to the security box station lock thing, where he has to walk into a glass booth that locks behind him so that he can then use the voice print thing. He brings out the little tape recorder, and he unfortunately has it set on double speed. So it says like, and
my passport? Yeah.
And the machine thankfully sort of recognized that as speak more slowly and try again. So he plays it. It's like, hi, my name is Werner Brandis. My voice is my passport. Verify me. You know, I love that.
Mhm.
And the door unlocks. So he goes down to Brandis's office and he climbs up through Brandis's office into the air ducts and then moves across to Cosmo's office. And then he drops down from behind the motion sensors and he starts his very, very slow walk towards the desk where the answering machine and the black box is.
Mhm.
In the meantime, we're back at Liz and Brandis, and they're kind of hanging out, and he shows her this toy, this voice-activated dog that he programmed. And he says, like, sit up or play dead or whatever, and the thing rolls over. And then she's like, oh, can I use your bathroom real quick? Because she wants to, like, get out of the... I forget what she wants to get out of the room exactly. I think she's having to get the card handed back to... No, it's something. I forget. Anyway, so as he directs her to where the bathroom is, and then just walk forward. And this was something that I didn't really understand until like the second time I watched the movie, is that his saying walk forward was giving a command to the dog toy accidentally. Mm-hmm. And so the dog walks forward and knocks her purse off the table onto the ground. And he's like, oh, stupid doggy. And he goes over and picks up her purse, and her wallet had fallen open, showing her real name, which isn't Doris, like she said on the date, but Liz. And so suddenly he gets very suspicious of everything that happened in the course of the night. And so he's like, passport, huh? My favorite word is passport. Let's go. And so he kind of takes her, he kidnaps her, basically. It's weird.
Well, in 80s movies, it was, well, and this is early 90s, but it was okay to kidnap women if they'd done you wrong. I don't know if you've noticed that about those movies, but yeah, you could just drag a woman around anywhere you wanted to.
So he just like takes her, and he drives her off to the office building because he understands there might be a security breach. And taking her with him and just sort of nabbing her makes perfect sense. Yes. So they all go to the building, and just amazingly enough, Timothy Busfield is there, and Cosmo is there, as Brandis is making a big scene at the front desk about whether somebody came in and all this other stuff. And so Cosmo says, let's take a look at his office. And all the while, Martin is just making his way across the room because he can only go 2 inches a second. So this is all happening in like very slow time. And he's almost done in the room when all this is going on. And so they go to Brandis's office, and there's nothing there. There's nothing out of place. Brandis checks like, okay, nothing's wrong. So they start leaving, and, they start apologizing to the lady, like, sorry about this, everything else, things happen. And she says, it's the last time I go out on a computer date. And then Cosmo stops and says, wait, a computer matched him to her? I don't think so. And I'm like, could you insult a guy more? But anyway, it doesn't really matter. So he suddenly goes, Marty. And Ben Kingsley's accent for Cosmo wavers over the course of the movie. Like he kind of sounds like he's from Brooklyn on the one hand or something, but then it kind of, anyway. So he starts marching back to his office, and Martin has just gotten back up into the air ducts with the box. And so Cosmo goes into his office, he looks around, doesn't see anything out of place, but then he goes over to the desk, and the box is gone. Oh, sorry, he opens up the box and it's empty.
Empty,
right? Yeah, he opens up the fake answering machine and it's empty. And so he screams, Marty! And so like all the alarms start going off, and all these guards show up. And something I forgot to mention, when Martin was first meeting with Cosmo lets him know that he's being funded by organized crime because he met these guys in jail who he did their taxes for, or figured out, or helped them make free phone calls as a phone freak. And over the course of time, he became more involved in their business and accounting and everything else. So he's like doing money laundering and all this other kind of stuff. So this entire operation, all the guards, the building, the former NSA guy, all this stuff is supposedly funded by mob money, which is weird. I always thought that was a really weird basis for all of this stuff.
Isn't it implied that it's not legal mob money though?
Well, no, that's what I mean. It's just that like like organized crime, which he says isn't very organized, has this sophisticated an operation going on that is like government levels of security and involvement and fake, fake companies and all stuff. It always seemed a little bit too far above what I assume like actual organized. If we're talking about like the Italian mafia,
yeah,
it just seemed a little bit. But regardless,
too far-fetched.
just a little bit. So then they start hunting through the building for Martin, and they threaten Liz. You know, if Martin doesn't reveal himself, he's going to kill Liz.
Here's the part: as Martin is going through the building and everything, they're back in the van directing him.
Yes, like they're trying to give him where to go, what's safe, because they tapped it.
Yeah, that was the part for me that's a little too fantastical, because they were on top. They saw everything. And
well, I mean, Carl was still in the building and he tapped into all the security cameras.
But even with all this, I hear you.
Well, they said the movie. Yeah, they said they had the floor plans, they had the security cameras, so it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway,
my disbelief a little bit.
Yeah, they corner Martin and they got Liz, and he gives up. He's trapped. He's got a guy with a shotgun on him. He can't go anywhere. So he drops down. They take him back to Cosmo's office with Liz, and he apologizes to Liz. And earlier, Cosmo had said, "I cannot kill my friend." You know, and Martin brings, reminds him of this. It's like, you can't kill your friend. And Cosmo says, "You're right. I cannot kill my friend." And then he looks over to Timothy Busfield, and the other guy says, "Kill my friend."
Kill my friend.
and the smile on Timothy Busfield's face is so great. He's so happy. He's like, "Oh, goody. I get to kill this guy." And so Cosmo leaves. And then Martin, who's still got his little radio bud in his ear, says, "Carl, now." And Carl, who is still in the air ducts, he busts through the ceiling and lands on one of the guys, and they have a fight. And Martin and Liz and Carl get away from these guys after knocking them out. Mm-hmm. Now, Mother and Crease and Whistler are still in the van on a hill outside the building trying to direct all this stuff. And Crease and Mother are outside the van with binoculars trying to see what's going on when they are caught by security. And Whistler, who's in the car, and the guys don't know Whistler's there, is hiding in the van. So Crease and Mother get captured and taken away. Now, this is where things get really, and this is where the movie starts failing for me. I mean, the little complaints I had earlier in the movie, minor, but this is where the movie starts going completely off kilter. So Bishop and Carl and Liz are running around trying to get out of the building. Whistler radios in saying, "Crease and Mother got caught. I'm alone in the van." And Martin's like, "Okay, we need a getaway." So they all go up to the roof, which has spotlights going around and shit. Mm-hmm. And they say, "Okay, Whistler, you're going to drive the van to us." He's like, "I'm blind." It's like, "Yeah, well, it's minor inconvenience."
I'll talk you through it. I'll talk you through it. Is what he says.
I'll talk you through it. And so then you get this. I mean, this is where I'm torn about this whole thing, is that I love this sequence, but it's ridiculous for the sake of logic in the film.
Sure.
So Whistler, being blind, takes direction from Martin as he watches from a roof to guide him to drive to the building, down the hill, through the parking lot. And it's this really funny sort of, Keystone Cops kind of thing, where the blind guy is driving a van.
Who he drives fantastically well, except for hitting a few other cars. He has to be told which is reverse on the tree. And then he has to be told which is drive. but he
Yeah.
doesn't have to be told brake and gas. I always like that part.
Now, the thing also to know is that as the van takes off, suddenly it distracts the guys who were apprehending Kreese and Mother, and Kreese goes all CIA agent and disables both guys and gets their guns.
Yes.
So it's important to know that everybody at this point is not captured. Okay?
Everyone's free.
Everyone's free. So Whistler drives the van all the way to the building and crashes into the wall at the last second, even though Martin told him that she'll come to a stop in 5 seconds, but it was 3 seconds too early. And so then the van's there. So they start, cheering, and they're running down to get there. And as Martin is about to climb down the ladder with the box in the backpack on his back, Cosmo shows up with a gun. And he's like, Marty, we could have changed the world. It's about the information, Marty. And, sorry, go ahead.
This is where I wanted to pause from when talking about the relevance of this movie today. Because he makes the comment that guns don't control the world anymore. It's information.
Right. And
in 1992, that was not true. It absolutely was not true. It was getting there. Today, if that statement was made, it would be absolutely true. Yeah. Information runs everything. That's why I say this is such a vision into the future from when this was made. I mean, this was what, 92. So we're talking 26 years ago.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, you could say that Cosmo was a visionary.
Sure.
Of what was happening and where it was going. Yes. Oh, yeah. The people who wrote this again. It's written by Phil Alden Robinson, Lawrence Lasker, Walter Park. So not any big names, that you would know otherwise. But yeah, the guys that wrote this, they had an understanding. Now maybe they just lucked out for the sake of the plot. This stuff and sort of informing this character that was sort of like the anti-Martin, but also like the idealist who went insane. At the same time, though, over the course of the entire movie, what is the most important thing in moving the plot along? Finding out the truth of what the situation is, finding out the information.
Yeah.
Who are these NSA guys really NSA guys? No, they're not. Who are they really? We don't know. Are they Russians? No, they're not. Who are they? We don't know. Really discovering the truth of the matter, discovering the information, even if you're not talking about electronically, it's just knowing.
Cosmo could be Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
That's what jumped out at me. It's like that could be Mark Zuckerberg right there.
Well, you know what? And just to put a pin on it, he might as well be Mark Zuckerberg, because Martin gives up the box. He hands the sack to Cosmo and says, fine, take it. I don't want it. It wasn't going to do any good anyway. And so he takes off, and then he climbs down the ladder. And Cosmo still can't bring himself to shoot Martin as he goes. Cosmo takes the box out of the backpack, opens up the fake answering machine, and it's empty. Because it was the test one that Martin was using to walk across the floor with, not the one that actually has the black box in it.
Yes.
And then he kind of closes his eyes and looks up. Now, Cosmo gets away. A couple of things here. Martin and everybody else get away, even though the whole place was swarming with guards with shotguns. And they only took out like 4 or 5 of them, let's say, over the course of things. We never see the fake FBI agent that killed Gregor again. Martin and everybody just drive off somehow from this highly secured building with spotlights. I guess. So anyway, they drive off. Cosmo, that is the last we see of Cosmo. We never hear about him again. Not even in sort of the afterword do we hear anything about Blau was arrested. No, they all got away. As far as the movie's concerned, Cosmo, Timothy Busfield, the NSA guy, the guys who killed the Russian, nothing happens. They just get away. They don't have the black box anymore, but they get away.
Well, Cosmo went on to found Facebook.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, really, it's like, well, this organized crime thing didn't work for me. I think I'll go start a website. So then they all go back to the clubhouse, revealing to the audience that they had the real answering machine with the black box in it the whole time. They go back to the clubhouse, where they're met by Darth Vader. James Earl Jones and this entire little NSA team were there with like, they had like Heckler and Koch, like MP5s or something trained on these guys. And so they're all lined up on the wall, and he starts saying, "Give me the box." And then they start dealing. And Martin says, you know, it'd be a real shame if anybody found out that the NSA bungled this so bad, and or that there was a box that could do this, and or all this other stuff. So they start trying to blackmail the NSA with what they know about the entire operation at this point. And so Abbott's like, okay, what do you want? And he's like, I want clear up my record. You know, take away my little federal thing from way back when. Just clean that up. He's like, okay, now give me the box. And then Mother's like, I want a Winnebago.
I want a Winnebago.
He's like, what? He's like, I want a Winnebago.
We're not car salesmen. We're the NSA.
Yeah. Yeah. Not these guys. And then
this is a funny part because one, yeah, you do have to suspend disbelief because they're talking to the NSA here, who, let's be real, could have just shot him, could have just taken it. But Whistler, Mother steps up, and then Kreese steps up.
Yeah,
I want a trip to Europe for my wife. No, he goes, I've never taken a trip to Europe with my wife. And James Earl Jones goes, how sad for you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Give me the box.
Yeah. No, I want to go to Crete, and he names off all these places, and he goes, fine. He goes, and Tahiti. Tahiti's not in Europe.
Yeah, well, yeah. And Tahiti. Tahiti's not in Europe. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, the man wants to go to Tahiti.
But the best one is River Phoenix.
Yes.
All he wants is the phone number of the young female NSA agent there.
Yeah, she's this hot little blonde number, and he's like, "Is the young lady over there single?" And Robert Redford takes him back and says, "Carl, this is the shot at the brass ring. You can have anything you want, and you know, it's like I just want her number." And so the blonde girl walks over and says, "You could have anything you want, and you want my phone number?" And he's just like, yeah. And she lists it off, and he kind of commits it to memory. And then James Earl Jones says, I'm going to be sick. Yes. He says it in such deadpan seriousness that you can't help but start laughing.
Only James Earl Jones could have pulled that off.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then he looks at Liz, and with this very gallant sort of like bow and smile, he says, and how about you? And she says, oh, I'm fine.
Yes.
The whole thing is brilliant. So then Martin hands him the box, and because we have a deal. And as they leave, Martin says, "You know, it never worked, right? It doesn't work right. It never did." And James Earl Jones says, "It doesn't matter, you know."
What matters is this never happened.
Right. It matters. This never happens. And they walk out. Now, it's really weird. Why would Martin say it never worked? Because it did work. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention is like way back when he was talking to Gregor said that, you know, the Russian systems, the American system work on completely different algorithms or whatever. And since this box can decode American stuff, it conceivably can't decode Russian stuff. So the only thing it's good for is spying on Americans, you know, which the NSA would never do.
Yeah, because they specifically say so you could listen into the FBI and the CIA and
Right. And I really love it that without coming out and saying it, the writers of the movie were saying the NSA were spying on Americans or had the intention to, because they're paying Yannick to develop this thing, conceivably to spy on our own agencies, which is also kind of prescient.
And again, you have to remember, this is at a time when the NSA was not a well-known organization. Yeah. You always heard about the FBI, the CIA. You never heard about the NSA. This is the first time I ever heard about them, was watching this movie.
And so then they all leave, and then we cut to a news report that says like, well,
wait, you missed one part there. Yeah. Because he tells them that it never worked anyway. And as they leave, Liz asks him, aren't they going to check? Aren't they going to find out it works? And Martin goes, no. And he holds up a computer chip.
Oh, yeah, the actual chip that fueled the whole thing. He says, not without this.
Yeah.
And then we cut to the news report saying, you know, the Republican National Committee has announced today that they're bankrupt.
They had plenty of money last week.
Yeah, they had plenty of money last week. They just don't know where it went. But on the other hand, Greenpeace and the ACLU suddenly have huge donations of millions of dollars. It's like, so wait a second. You did what Cosmo wanted to do in the first place anyway, and stole money, and Cosmo got. These are the loose ends that still make me go, but the thing is, I forgive the movie because it is otherwise so entertaining and fun.
Yeah, the end of the movie makes no sense, none at all. Because yeah, if he was going to do this, the only reason not to work with Cosmo is that he'd gone insane and killed people. But Martin specifically tells him, this isn't power I want, and yet he takes it and uses it. He didn't just destroy the chip.
Right.
He still, you're right, gives Cosmo exactly what he wanted, other than the ultimate power to do it himself.
Yeah, or ideally, or letting it fall into quote unquote the wrong hands, let's say.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the movie kind of just ends right there, basically, with this sort of epilogue. So there are a lot of plot holes and loose ends in this movie. Not as many as some other movies, but there are some significant ones, especially in the last 20 minutes or so. But outside of that, everything in this film, all the acting, all the characters, the camaraderie, the sort of weird combination of quirky, funny stuff with serious intrigue and spy motif, the whole 9 yards. It's such a deep movie. It's got so much going on, but it never really drops the ball. You never feel like you're lost. They do a great job of leading you through all this relatively complex stuff and having a good time while doing it.
Yeah, it's a really fun movie. I mean, it would never pass today just because, again, like we know the NSA, there's so much more to it. If suddenly the RNC became bankrupt, that would be fixed immediately through other financial, they would flag that down, figure out, let's see, all of that money just went to Greenpeace. Excuse me. But again, for me, watching this was just how relevant it actually would be today, though. The idea that you could decrypt anything would absolutely be powerful.
Yes.
Every time we look at media companies, it's all about the new encryption and making sure nobody can get your information, because today, back then, credit cards and everything weren't completely digitized like they are today. Cash was still a thing. Excuse me. So in today's world, it would be even so much more relevant. And like I said, this movie is just ahead of its time with, I don't think, meaning to be.
Yeah, but even if you don't care about the politics or the subtext or anything else, it is a fun caper movie.
Yes,
and I love caper movies. I love movies where a team of people, hopefully with with interesting personalities and quirks and everything else, have to work together to solve a problem and solve it creatively. And I'm reminded of just like the scene in Apollo 13 where they have to figure out how to fit a round filter into a square outlet or whatever.
Oh yeah,
yeah, things like that where you're presented a problem and then you have to find a creative way to solve that problem, and you as the audience get to follow along and find a certain amount of satisfaction and joy in watching people come up with ways to get around the obstacles they have before them, because it always goes back to like solving problems in life and things like that. And this cast, like I say, there are a few movies that get an ensemble cast right, not only in the casting itself, but also in how they interact, how the characters are structured together, and how they're presented. This is one of them for sure. The other one is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Now, let me ask you real quick. How much of that do you think was the actors? I mean, we have Robert Redford, no matter what you think about his politics, the man can act. Sidney Poitier, Dan Aykroyd. I mean, these are even, I forget the guy's name who played Whistler, but he's a good actor.
David Strathairn. And David Strathairn, he's done tons and tons of stuff. One of the things that I love him in is a movie that was done by George Clooney, strangely enough, from Ocean's 11, called Good Night and Good Luck, which was about Murrow and the whole thing between him and McCarthy. And David Strathairn just nailed Murrow in that movie.
I'm not sure this would have worked with a different cast, just because the people that they got to play these parts were excellent in them. But I think that's so much to do with how good they are as actors themselves.
I also wonder, and this might be listed somewhere, I gotta wonder if there wasn't some time of rehearsal, because when I see a cast of disparate characters and actors like that gel so organically together, it always makes me think there had to be a decent amount of prep time for all these guys to get those relationships down beforehand. Sure. Because the way movies are made these days, extensive time of rehearsal prior to production is basically unheard of. You get like a table read, and maybe you do some prep beforehand, but you don't get like a full rehearsal of everything on site or something before you move on to actually filming the movie. At the same time, though, all the actors are just at the top of their game for just playing a part. I mean, you don't think about it's Robert Redford or that's Sidney Poitier or something. Or these guys are now. It doesn't hurt that Dan Aykroyd is a conspiracy theorist in real life, so he could pull that off real easy. But yeah, everybody did a great job. It's a fun little movie. It's tightly written. It's got a lot of layers to it if you care to pay attention to them. But if you don't, it's still an interesting caper movie and really fun. And like Monkey said, there's so much in it that is reminding of Ocean's 11, and that whole sort of genre of heist movie, you know. But also, like I can't say enough just how memorable the dialogue, the characters are, with so much going on. My voice is my passport, verify me, is like an inside joke between me and so many of my friends, because we remember that movie and just like the weirdness of that entire situation. So I think I'm out of things to say.
Well, I do want to point, because you mentioned caper movie and
yes.
Heist movie.
Yes.
This is a heist movie in many ways, because they are stealing stuff. But it also classifies as a caper. To a certain extent, it classifies as a spy movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just so much fun, guys. It is not a deep movie.
No, not really. I mean, there are some deep concepts going on, as subtext, but the movie itself, just for the sake of what it is, not very deep.
No, and it's just a good fun movie. And if you hadn't seen it before now, you know all of the spoilers, so you should have watched the movie, damn it. Yeah. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, I do still recommend it, because the interactions, the characters are what really makes the movie.
Yeah, and if you want to see basically the grandfather of things like Now You See Me and the modern incarnations of Ocean's 11 and stuff, Sneakers is a good place to start, because all the elements of those types of movies are in this one and done very, very well. Well, unless we got something else to say.
No, that's again, I would just encourage watching it, because it is good.
All right, guys. Everyone in the chat, Okie Native, Data Wasteland. Let me go over the roster here while I'm sitting here. The game doesn't change, just the players. Angela, Chucky B, Faith is Abdication of Reason, La Nuggets, the original Shroom. Snubbirth was in there too. Kelvin was in there too. Mashishu was in there too. Circus Zero, Stargazer Nuts. Am I leaving anyone out? Cannibal Caretaker was also there, and Sylvanas, and Corey Suzuki. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's the afternoon. I'm so used to saying tonight because of Lords of the Night. I'm actually Lord of the Afternoon right now. So guys, don't know when we'll do the next one of these. We got to figure out what movie to do, but it'll be on Monkey's channel.
I do want to throw this out there, guys. We appreciate all the suggestions we get, but there's a couple of things that I do want to point out. One, we try to stay away from strict comedies. Somebody brought up Weekend at Bernie's. I love that movie. I don't think we could do a review of it, because so much of it is based on subjective comedy.
Yes.
And the other thing is, like the other day, somebody asked us if we do Top Gun. While today there's probably a good part of the generation who hasn't seen that movie, those of us who grew up with us, all of us saw that movie a lot.
Yeah.
We try to tend towards more of the, like Sneakers, which was a box office success. still, I know lots of people who've never seen that movie. So we try to go for a little bit under the radar kind of movies too. So if you have suggestions, happy to hear them. Just keep those two things in mind.
Yeah. And so whatever we end up doing next, we'll be doing over on Monkey's channel. So keep an eye on our Twitters for that, or anything we might mention on Lords of the Night, because we will give as much heads up on those as we can. But otherwise, guys, thank you again for joining us. Oh, and hi, Alpha Omega. You're here too. Yeah, go see the movie if you haven't already. And otherwise, yeah, we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye, guys.